It's hard not to laugh at the SJW community sometimes. Gender scholars, really? Can I find the collegiate courses listed alongside those in the social justice and women's studies majors? Sargon's tweet seemed like a no-brainer. Orwell was right. Good one, Sargon. You called them out. At this time, I found myself in a bit of a black humor, so I decided to read the article and get a good chuckle. Turns out, the article wasn't all that Orwellian, and it got me thinking. Does anyone remember when the term sexual harassment actually meant something? Thanks to the SJW community throwing the term around so casually, it can now mean anything as inconsequential as wolf whistling, or a man simply speaking to a woman in public without her pre-approved consent. Not wanting Orwell to go the way of sexual harassment, I asked Sargon to stop applying the term Orwellian, where it really didn't apply. It seemed like a reasonable request, but I didn't really expect a personal response from Sargon. He is a popular content creator on YouTube and has thousands of followers on Twitter, and rightly so. He makes intelligent, humorous, and poignant arguments well worth taking note of. He can't be expected to reply to every single tweet thrown his way. However, I haven't seen so many responses to a single tweet of mine since I posted under the hashtag Buffalo Genocide. I don't hold Sargon responsible for the comments made by others. I only point out the immediate flood of support for Sargon because it was quite obvious that most of the individuals responding hadn't taken the time to actually read the article for themselves, and some didn't even grasp the context of the interaction. This herd mentality was disturbing to witness, and the SJW-esque tendency of Sargon's followers to believe what I'm told was quite disappointing. Later, I received this inspiring tweet from another content creator who I respect for their intelligence and excellent content. Now, much like Sargon, Vernaculus has the misfortune of dealing with trolls on a daily basis, so his offhand dismissal of my comment can be understood, but I still have to question it. For someone who is a free speech purist, telling an individual to shut up simply because they disagree with you is not particularly conducive to creating a dialogue. I wasn't spamming the same bullshit over and over again. I wasn't using ad hominem attacks, or taking Sargon out of context, or trying to redefine any terms, or to derail the conversation. I merely had a different opinion. I was fortunate enough to receive a response from Sargon, in which he politely highlighted why I was mistaken and that his original comment, Orwell was right, was totally relevant as a critique of this article. While I appreciated the response, I still thought I was correct, so I decided to collect my thoughts and go back to the text. Now, before I begin, I in no way, shape, or form agree with the arguments or conclusions of this article. I do not intend to defend their arguments or their conclusions. I merely intend to explain why this article and its author's position is not Orwellian. The article contends that the status quo rhetoric uses gendered language. It also indicates that the gendered terms used in the English language reinforce a binary view of gender, which is important later on in the article. The authors then indicate the use of gendered language in several areas of our lexicon. They list several gendered nouns which are commonly used, such as boy and girl, son, sister, wife, and uncle. The article indicates how these terms can often be replaced by gender-neutral terms to accomplish the same task without further entrenching the binary dichotomy of gender. The article also examines how this happens with gendered generic nouns, pronouns, masculine generic noun and pronouns, honorific titles, and given names. If the article ended here, I could understand how this could be described as Orwellian. This appears to be the PC police out to control language. However, all we've seen so far is the way that the authors of this article view language in the status quo. The article argues that the use of gendered language ingrains the concept of a binary gender system which transforms into thought. This leads to increased stereotyping and prejudice. The authors cite a social experiment where children were presented with several objects that had labels attached to them. Later, those children were more likely to select an object when they were familiar with the label attached to it than to select a novel object. The crux of this argument is that by continually being indoctrinated with gendered language, an individual is more likely to associate with a label that they are familiar with and hold prejudicial views about the other. Essentially, when an individual hears the term mailman often enough, they associate that role with a man. Even if the term evolves and male man or male woman are used interchangeably as correctly applies to the situation, that still normalizes that there are only two genders in society and otherizes individuals who don't identify as male or female. As I said before, I do not actually believe this to be true. However, this is what the article is arguing. The authors conclude that being raised in a society where gender is continually reinforced in our everyday language, they will inherently grow up with the biases that revolve around the socially accepted concept of a dualistic gender system. The article then goes on to list some areas where the issue of gendered language is already being addressed in our current lexicon. In the end, they conclude that gendered language is common in English. This leads to the binary treatment of gender, which is not consistent with how all individuals see themselves. It creates an us versus them mentality where those who don't conform will always be at a disadvantage. By removing the gendered language, which associates a binary gender with what is normal or right, we can address the issues that gendered language raise for non-binary individuals. To frame the article in Orwellian terms, the authors argue that the language and rhetoric used in the status quo is in fact the newspeak which Orwell warned us about. By conflating the subject with a socially acceptable gender, it furthers the political agenda of the correct members in society and helps solidify current social norms. If you read the Principles of Newspeak at the end of Orwell's 1984, you will find Newspeak has been derived to meet the ideological needs of Ingsoc, or English socialism. In the year 1984, there was not yet anyone who used Newspeak as a sole means of communication, either in speech or writing. The leading article of the Times were written in it, but this was a tour de force which could only be carried out by a specialist. The authors of the article would argue that we are already entrenched in Newspeak. Gendered language serves the needs of a society crafted around a binary gender system and helps them remain in control. It serves to ostracize individuals who don't conform to these social norms. The purpose of Newspeak was not only to provide a medium of expression for the worldview and mental habits proper to the devotees of Ingsoc, but to make sure all other modes of thought impossible. This was done partly by the invention of new words, but chiefly by eliminating undesirable words and stripping such words as remained of unorthodox meanings, and so far as possible of all secondary meanings whatsoever. Quite apart from the suppression of definitely heretical words, reduction of vocabulary was regarded as an end in itself, and no word that could be dispensed with was allowed to survive. Newspeak was designed not to extend, but to diminish the range of thought, and this purpose was indirectly assisted by cutting the choice of words down to a minimum. Working from the article's premise that we are already indoctrinated into using Newspeak, the status quo lexicon took its form by implementing gendered language into society. It continues to this day with the suppression of gender-neutral nouns and pronouns. By maintaining a gendered language, society continues to reinforce the concept of a bipolar gender norm. The status quo is attempting to cut the choices of acceptable words down to those which perpetuate its power within the system. The Newspeak vocabulary consisted of words which had been deliberately constructed for political purposes. Words, that is to say, which not only had in every case a political implication, but were intended to impose a desirable mental attitude upon the person using them. Essentially, Newspeak is an attempt at using language to shape thought and action. This is exactly what the authors tried to illustrate with the study mentioned previously. In Newspeak, the expression of unorthodox opinions above a very low level was well nigh impossible. It would have been possible, for example, to say, Big Brother is ungood, but this statement, which to an orthodox ear merely conveyed a self-evident absurdity, could not have been sustained by reasonable argument, because the necessary words were not available. In the end, the article seeks to expand language to make it more descriptive and less prescriptive. It attempts to dismantle a language system which shares many similarities with Newspeak, and amend it to allow for more equality and less categorization and prejudice. So let's address the original premise. A very good argument can be made that this article not only isn't Orwellian, but that it is heeding the warnings that Orwell left us and is recognizing that our society has instituted its own form of Newspeak. Whether or not you agree with the premises and conclusions of this article is irrelevant. I personally do not believe that gendered language inherently creates prejudicial mindsets and actions. The fact is that this particular article, in the way they have constructed their arguments and conclusions, is not Orwellian. So once again, I ask you, please, do not throw around the term Orwellian. We are not SJWs to depreciate the value of a word simply because using it makes for quick, easy criticism. And if you think I'm wrong, please let me know. Leave a comment below. Send me a tweet. Hell, make a response video. I would much rather have the discussion and be proven wrong than to not have the discussion at all and slide down the rabbit hole into a world of believe what I say. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And please, don't forget to leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Have a great night.